This is Marvin Emerson from Crystal Lake Fisheries Trout Farm here in Avon, Missouri. This is a family-owned, family-managed rainbow trout farm. We specialize in recreational rainbow trout that we do live stocking throughout the Midwest and the United States. We've stocked in some 38 different states with our live trucks over the last 70 years of production that we've had here in the States and all. It all started in the 1930s, in which our dad, Dwight, and his dad, Glenn Emerson, like to fly fish, and especially they like to fly fish for rainbow trout. And that kind of started the whole thing about Dad's thinking about rainbow trout. Dad was married to our mother, Mary Alice Emerson, in 1940. They were in Warsaw, Missouri, and they became friends with the mail carrier there in Warsaw, Missouri. And as they did that, they kind of talked to him, and he said, I used to carry mail back in the little town of Avon, Missouri, and he actually carried on horseback. And he said, there was really a nice spring down there. And he said, you ought to go and check it out. They kind of wandered down the road, and they got here, and they kind of peeked through the willows, and they looked at the fish farm, and they said, oh, it is a very nice spring. And they thought, that's something they thought they might want to approach. So the general warranty deed that Mom and Dad signed was on December 15th, 1950. And they actually paid for that 35 acres, $8,000. In amongst that, they had talked with the neighbors, and the neighbors said, this is a very, very good spring and never lost any of its volume during the drought of 1936. So Mom and Dad, there were still a few minnows on the place. They got a few trout, and they raised some trout and all. In 1957, there was a feed problem, and 95% of our trout died in less than a week. And it was just a disaster. Dad had to take a job off farm, full-time job, and he worked at Sheffield Steel, which was in Kansas City. He commuted back and forth. But while he was gone, Mom, Mary Alice, just kind of worked at the farm. She kind of held things together during the week. We were old enough to kind of get in trouble, but also feed a few fish and clean a few screens, and we did that. We had some local hired hands that came in and actually helped work on the farm and all. So they kind of kept things together until 1964 when Dad returned. So we did some marketing. Things improved here on the farm, and we actually had some pretty good years for several years, but it was tough. It was tough on Mom, it was tough on Dad. They really had a lot of problems working through this and all. But I have to just compliment them very much. Dad, Mom had a vision, a long-term vision. They were part of that greatest generation. They grew up during the Great Depression. They grew up in World War II. They didn't actually know when some of their next meals were coming from. But they had that intestinal fortitude, and they guys kind of kept up with it, and they were able to kind of get through those bad years and continue on. Mom and Dad's grandkids, which are my kids, Wesley's kids, Nancy's kids, and David's kids, kind of worked into the fish farm and have all contributed in their own different ways and all. We've had 5 generations of fish farmers here on the farm. We are very grateful to have the family that we have.